Welcome everyone to the Vitality Equation, exploring research in health and well-being one paper at a time. Today we're diving into a fascinating paper about proteomics data analysis.
Yeah, this one's titled Facilitating Analysis and Dissemination of Proteomics Data Through Metadata Integration in MaxQuant. Sounds a bit dense right off the bat, doesn't it?
Totally. But don't let the technical jargon scare you off. I think there are some really interesting implications for how we understand and improve health at a really fundamental level. I mean, proteomics is all about proteins, and proteins are basically the workhorses of our cells.
Exactly. So the big picture is that this research is all about making it easier for scientists to analyze and share information about proteins. Why is that important though?
Well, think about it this way. Every biological process, from muscle contraction to nerve signaling, involves proteins. If we can understand which proteins are present, in what quantities, and how they're modified, we can get a much better understanding of what's going on in a healthy cell versus a diseased cell. Or even in a fit person versus someone who isn't as active, right?
Right. So this MaxQuant software, it's a tool that researchers use to identify and quantify proteins in biological samples. It's like having a super-powered microscope that can not only see the proteins, but also count them and tell you what they're doing.
And the metadata integration part, that's where things get really interesting, at least for me. It's about adding all that extra information, the context, to the protein data. Things like the experimental conditions, the patient's age, their lifestyle, even their stress levels. It's like giving the protein data a biography, right?
Yes, and that's crucial because without that context, the protein data is just a bunch of numbers. You need to know where it came from and what was going on at the time to really make sense of it. Think of it like this. If you just looked at someone's brain scan, you wouldn't know if they were thinking about a relaxing vacation or trying to solve a complex math problem. The context matters.
Exactly. And that's where the potential for improving lives comes in. For example, let's say you're studying muscle growth after exercise. You could use MaxQuant to identify the proteins that are upregulated, that is, increased in muscle tissue after a workout. But if you also integrate metadata about the type of exercise, the person's diet, their sleep patterns, you can start to paint a much more complete picture of what's driving muscle growth.
So by adding all this metadata, we're not just seeing the proteins, we're understanding the why behind the changes. And that understanding is key to developing targeted interventions.
Precisely. And I think that's where the cognitive aspect comes in. Think about the placebo effect. People who believe they're getting a treatment often experience real, measurable improvements, even if they're just getting a sugar pill. Now imagine if we could use proteomics to understand the biological mechanisms underlying the placebo effect. Maybe we could identify proteins that are upregulated in people who respond well to placebos, and then develop therapies that mimic those effects, regardless of a person's belief system.
That's a mind-blowing idea. And it also makes me think about how we can use this kind of data to personalize exercise and sleep recommendations. We know that people respond differently to the same exercise regimen or sleep schedule. Some people thrive on high-intensity interval training, while others do better with more moderate activity. Some need 8 hours of sleep, while others function perfectly well on 7.
Yeah, and proteomics combined with metadata about a person's lifestyle and genetics could help us understand why those differences exist. Maybe we could identify protein signatures that predict how someone will respond to a particular workout or sleep schedule. Then we could tailor our recommendations accordingly.
Yes, and consider this. We could use proteomics to understand how different cognitive techniques affect the body. For example, mindfulness meditation has been shown to reduce stress and improve overall well-being. But what's actually happening at the cellular level? Are there specific proteins that are upregulated or downregulated during meditation? If we could identify those proteins, we could potentially develop even more effective meditation techniques or even pharmacological interventions that mimic the benefits of meditation.
That's amazing. It's like we're finally starting to understand the biological basis of things that we've known intuitively for centuries. We've always known that exercise and sleep are good for us, but now we're starting to understand why at a molecular level.
Right, and that understanding can lead to really powerful interventions. For example, let's say we identify a protein that's crucial for muscle repair after exercise. We could then develop a supplement or a drug that targets that protein, enhancing muscle recovery and preventing injuries.
Or let's say we identify a protein that's involved in the stress response. We could develop a CBT technique that specifically targets the cognitive processes that lead to the upregulation of that protein. It's like a laser-focused cognitive intervention based on real-time biological data.
And this isn't just about treating diseases, it's also about optimizing performance. Think about athletes. They're always looking for ways to gain a competitive edge. Proteomics could help them identify the optimal training regimen, diet, and sleep schedule to maximize their performance and minimize their risk of injury.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how this might be applied to habit formation. If we can identify the specific proteins that are involved in creating new neural pathways, maybe we can develop strategies to make it easier to form positive habits and break negative ones. It's almost like biohacking your brain, right?
Exactly. And it all comes back to that metadata integration. It's not enough to just know which proteins are present. You need to know the context, the person's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, to really understand what's going on and how to intervene effectively.
So, what are some of the limitations of this research? I mean, it sounds amazing, but surely there are some challenges.
Well, proteomics data is notoriously complex and difficult to analyze. There are thousands of proteins in every cell, and they're all interacting with each other in incredibly intricate ways. It's like trying to understand a city by looking at every single person and trying to figure out what they're doing and how they're interacting with each other.
Plus, proteomics is still a relatively new field, so the technology is constantly evolving. The instruments are expensive, and the analysis techniques are still being refined, but it's advancing at an incredible rate. Also, the data has to be properly normalized to account for biases in the measurement process. Otherwise, you might end up drawing the wrong conclusions.
And then there's the issue of reproducibility. It can be difficult to replicate proteomic studies across different labs and different instruments. That's why it's so important to have standardized protocols and data analysis pipelines, like the ones that are being developed with MaxQuant.
Right? And that's where this paper really shines. It's about making proteomics data more accessible and reproducible. By integrating metadata into the analysis process, it makes it easier for researchers to share their data and compare their results. This accelerates the pace of discovery and helps to ensure that the findings are reliable.
It's also worth noting that proteomics is just one piece of the puzzle. To really understand health and disease, you need to integrate proteomics data with other types of data, like genomics, transcriptomics, and metabolomics. It's all about taking a systems level approach.
Absolutely. It's like trying to understand a car. You can't just look at the engine. You need to look at the transmission, the wheels, the electrical system, everything. And you need to understand how all those parts work together to make the car move.
Yes, and even more than that, you need to understand who is driving the car, what the road conditions are like, and where they are going. That's the equivalent of the metadata, the context that gives the data meaning.
So looking ahead, what are some of the most promising areas of research in this field?
I think one of the most exciting areas is personalized medicine. As we learn more about the protein signatures that are associated with different diseases and different responses to treatment, we can start to tailor our interventions to the individual. No more one-size-fits-all approaches.
I agree. And I think that the potential for integrating proteomics with cognitive neuroscience is huge. By understanding the biological mechanisms that underlie cognitive processes, we can develop more effective therapies for mental health disorders and improve cognitive performance in healthy individuals.
From my perspective, I'm really interested in exploring the link between proteomics and lifestyle factors. How do things like diet, exercise, sleep, and stress affect our protein profiles? And can we use that knowledge to develop lifestyle interventions that promote health and well-being? It's about taking a holistic approach to health, recognizing that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors all have a profound impact on our biology.
Yeah, I'm also curious about the long-term effects. Like if we see these protein changes after exercise, how long do they last? And what's the cumulative effect of regular exercise on our proteome over years or decades? That's where the really big insights are going to come from, I think.
And what about the ethical implications? As we learn more about the genetic and proteomic basis of health and disease, we need to be careful about how we use that information. We need to ensure that it's used to promote health and well-being, not to discriminate or stigmatize.
That's a really important point. We need to have a serious conversation about the ethical implications of personalized medicine and make sure that everyone has access to these technologies, regardless of their socioeconomic status or background.
Absolutely. It's about using this knowledge to empower people to take control of their own health, not to create new forms of inequality.
So if I were a researcher looking to build on this study, I'd focus on developing more sophisticated algorithms for analyzing proteomics data and integrating it with other types of data. We need better tools to make sense of all this complexity.
I'd focus on conducting more longitudinal studies, following people over time to see how their protein profiles change in response to different lifestyle interventions. We need to understand the long-term effects of our choices.
And I'd focus on developing more personalized exercise and sleep recommendations based on individual protein signatures. We need to move beyond the one-size-fits-all approach and tailor our recommendations to the individual.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. It's amazing to see how far proteomics has come and how much potential it has to improve our understanding of health and well-being.
Definitely. It's a complex field, but it's also incredibly promising. And with tools like MaxQuant, it's becoming more accessible to researchers and clinicians.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everyone to be aware of this research, even if they don't have a science background, because it's ultimately about empowering people to take control of their own health and make informed decisions about their lifestyle.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us on the Vitality Equation. We hope you found this discussion informative and inspiring. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the science of health and well-being.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.